and welcome to the program. Canada's election observation mission to Ukraine CANADEM has officially started to observe the extraordinary parliamentary election in Ukraine scheduled for July 21st, 2019. The mission will observe all aspects of the parliamentary electoral process and assess compliance with international standards for democratic elections and domestic laws. To talk more about this, we're joined in the studio today by Olya Odynska-Grod, Deputy Head of Mission Canada 2019. Hello, and thank you for joining us. So my understanding is that you're in Ukraine since a few times now. You went to Chernihiv earlier. Why this city? Why is it important?
We went to Chernihiv today to work with our long-term observers to make a short report on their work so that we can send that back to our fellow Canadians so they understand how the mission is unfolding, and to demonstrate what type of work is done on the ground by the long-term observers, which primarily today we met with a party representative. We then had an opportunity to meet with a single majority candidate. We met with the district officer for Opora, and we also had an opportunity to meet with the deputy chief of police. And this gives us a chance to pose questions, to see how the electoral process is unfolding. And of course, we will report that back to our team in Kyiv at our headquarters.
Now, while you live in Canada, you come to Ukraine quite often. Now, according to your observations, how has the mood of Ukrainians being changed due to the election preparations?
The current situation. I think that the mood now is very happy that there is an official date. I think it was a little bit nervous, maybe tension previously, but now that we have an official date has been established, I think everyone's down to business. Electioneering is happening, and I think people are very satisfied that they can move forward.
Now, can you tell us more about the mission's mandate? Because the mission mandate is to provide an assessment of the presidential electoral process and the parliamentary process. But can you tell us more about this mandate?
The methodology that we use is to observe, to monitor, but not to interfere. And at the end of the election process, we will be holding a preliminary report at a press conference where we will discuss what we observed, and then later we will write a full report in consultation, of course, with all of our analysts. We have a legal analyst, we have an electoral analyst, etc. And we are also monitoring the social and inclusion and gender and other aspects of the election, and then we will present a final report on our findings, based on our observations, and at the end possibly some recommendations for the Ukrainian government to consider.
Now, you said something quite interesting, monitoring without interfering, because there's going to be observation at the end. So how do you find the balance in between monitoring without interfering? What's the challenge here?
I don't think it's difficult, because if myself, along with our head of mission, Honorable Lloyd Axworthy, who will be here in a couple of weeks, we have gone ourselves to both Irpin and other cities, and we have a chart, a list, and we have a good questionnaire. We follow the questionnaire. And should we see what we consider to be perhaps a violation, we would talk to the head of the particular PEC or DEC, or at worst, report it to the police if it was necessary. And but we don't tell anyone what to do, how to do it, or how to fix it. This is
just
for
it happened, basically.
Exactly. We would record what we see, and then we will bring it back to our analyst team for their analysis and then for potential recommendations.
Now, what are observers' responsibility would outline as the most crucial in that case? Yeah.
I think the greatest responsibility is to observe without opinion. Or if you have an opinion, keep it to yourself. To look at everything very objectively, understand, the situation where you are, look at everything with open eyes, and just record what you see, without any personal opinion involved.
Now, a group of short-term observers will join Mission Canada a week before the election day. What's the difference between long-term observers and the short-term observers for the viewers to understand here?
There's a very big difference. The long-term observers actually live in a community. So like today in Chernihiv, they actually live in the community, they eat in the community, you know, they visit, and they have a chance to have more extensive, long discussions with all of our interlocutors. Whereas when the short-term observers arrive, they are coming in with, you know, a fresh set of eyes, but they have a very short window in order to do their observation. So they don't have a chance to meet all of these other people, to assess quite as much. So they rely on the LTO to brief them, and then they get down to work with their chart and their tablet and their phone and do their job.
So these are complementary tasks on
They are
field.
very complementary, yes. And of course, we can have more STOs on the ground. For example, in Chernihiv right now we have 2 LTOs, and we will be adding to them another 4 STOs. So now we have, you know, that many more set of eyes and reports.
Now, speaking, because we spoke a little bit about violations in the election. Speaking of violations, have any violations been recorded by CANADEM so far, and how would you assess the general tone of the preparation right now this year?
We haven't had any reports of violations to this date from our LTOs, and I must say we have 40 LTOs in the field in all of the oblasts where the elections will be held. And we do have our legal analyst, along with our advisor to our legal analyst, who have been going and reviewing court cases, so that, you know, we are on top of it, so to speak, but have not had a report of anything to this date that they are investigating.
Compared to other years, would you say there's been two other, electoral events? Would you say there is progress here? Would you say, did you assess some progress or some?
I would say that the elections are unfolding in a very normal, professional way. That is our observation. That's the reporting that we're getting. We haven't had any difficulties in the field. The reports are very positive.
Now, you've been observing also the presidential election, so this year, 2019. What recommendation, in general, would you voice then for potential improvements for the electoral process, presidential or parliamentary and electoral process, let's say, in general?
Well, I think the recommendations that we have been talking about in general are things like secret ballot. I think that we discussed this, in fact, today with our your Opoto representative, in terms of having your ballots closed when you drop them in. It's just perhaps a little. We do that in Canada. It's a system that we like.
Yes.
It's well, then it is a secret ballot. Yes. And one of the other things is proper packaging for the carrying of the ballots, especially when they go from the pack to the deck. Having some kind of a standardized container mechanism that could make that transfer a little more professional than it currently is would be another potential little change. And the training that is going on, of course, is very compressed at this moment for the PEC index. And we heard that commentary today saying that when the timeline is short, it is a little bit of a challenge to get everyone selected, and then at the same moment to do training that is robust. And so maybe it's a little bit just over the top, you know, just along the top periphery, but you can't dig down a whole lot. One of the other things that we talked about today also was the fact that we have associations, what we call riding associations, that work all year long, every year, not just during the few weeks before elections. And perhaps that kind of a system in the future might be something that would come under consideration.
So relying in some ways of people who are already on the field for all years long.
Exactly, and they work with candidates or are there to advise or help, and we find that process is helpful in Canada. And of course, we find very much helpful the opportunity to cast your ballot in advance. So we have advance polling for those people who leave the country and cannot exercise their right to vote on that particular day.
So it would be addressed to I mean, Canadian, Ukrainian diaspora, or people like that who live in Canada and who wants to vote for the presidential elections in Ukraine?
No, I'm saying in general, for Canadians, we have this process of advanced polling, but for the diaspora communities around the world, they vote on the same day, and they have an election process that is organized for them through the embassies around all of the various countries of the world.
What are the factors that could help basically to go to even more transparency and really attain, let's say, some Western countries, standards?
Well, I think that you just need people to come out and vote. You need trained staff at all levels of the electoral process that can, make sure that everything follows the letter of the law and functions properly. And I think that is really key. I think the mechanics of how things function here has its system, and people understand it and work within those frameworks. But with, some little tweaks that I mentioned earlier before that may make things just a wee bit easier. I think the most difficult is some of the distances that PEC members have to travel to the deck, right? I mean, it's a long, and it's a very long, lengthy process, as we know. The count can take till morning in some places. So I think in future, I don't know, someday will we all be electronically doing this, perhaps? Is that, we'll see.
Now, and to conclude this interview, I know you cannot necessarily express opinion, but do you have a personal message, let's say, to viewers and Ukrainians who are going to take part in the parliamentary election and in the upcoming elections in general?
I would say go out and vote. It is your privilege. It is your responsibility. It's your duty. And I think Ukrainians are very lucky to have that opportunity and should exercise their right to vote.
Well, thank you very much to remind that to Ukrainians and voters. It was a pleasure to have you in the studio today to talk about elections and monitoring the elections.
Thank you very much.
That was Olya Odynska-Grod, Deputy Head of Mission Canada 2019. Thank you for watching the program and stay tuned for the rest.